countdown is on. The candidates, 8 of them, battling for the nomination.
We have a super mess in this country.
The mission, take back the White House. The issue, fixing the economy. We're live in Michigan, a state bruised and battered by the Great Recession. A snapshot of America's pain. Massive unemployment. Foreclosures in every neighborhood. Empty factories littering the landscape. Michigan, a state rescued from the brink by a controversial bailout costing U.S. taxpayers billions. But today, the Motor City is on the long road to recovery. The Big Three back in the black. The state beginning to restore the roar. Tonight, the candidates come here to face off and face the nation. What is their plan to jumpstart the American economy? What will they do if faced with another crippling financial crisis? And how will they deal with the growing unrest across America? A nation of hope, a nation of opportunity, a nation asking questions. Tonight, the best team in business will press for answers. Nothing is off limits when it comes to your money, your vote. CNBC presents, in association with the Michigan Republican Party, Your Money, Your Vote, the Republican presidential debate. Live from the campus of Oakland University in Rochester, Michigan.
I'm Maria Bartiromo.
I'm John Harwood, and welcome to CNBC's Republican presidential debate.
Tonight, we are here in the great state of Michigan for a debate that will focus almost exclusively on the economy and how to fix the financial problems of our country. On the stage tonight, from left to right, Senator Rick Santorum. Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann. Speaker Newt Gingrich. Governor Mitt Romney. Mr. Herman Cain. Governor Rick Perry. Congressman Ron Paul. And Governor Jon Huntsman.
Now, the candidates will have 60 seconds to respond to questions, 30 seconds for follow-ups and rebuttals. Those will be at the discretion of the moderators. We also want you, the candidates, to help us out a little bit by asking the questions as directly and specifically as you can. I know you want to. You've proven that. But just in case you get off topic, maybe by accident, we may have to interrupt you.
Throughout the evening tonight, we'll be joined by an all-star lineup of the smartest people on CNBC. First up tonight, Jim Cramer, the host of Mad Money. Jim, welcome.
Thank you, Maria.
And we also want to hear your voice. Go to our website, debate.cnbc.com, and tweet us at #CNBCDebate. All night, we'll be showing your tweets on the bottom of the screen, so all the candidates will have even more of a motive to impress.
In the interest of time, the candidates have agreed to forego opening and closing statements tonight. So let's get started. And we begin with you, Mr. Cain. I want to begin with what we saw today, another rough day for our money, for our 401ks. Once again, we were all impacted by the news that the Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped 400 points today. The reason? Italy is on the brink of financial disaster. It is the world's 7th largest economy. As president, what will you do to make sure their problems do not take down the U.S. financial system?
Let's start with two things. First, we must grow this economy. We are the biggest economy in the world, and as long as we are stagnant in terms of growth in GDP, we impact the rest of the world. We must do that, but we're not going to be able to do that until we put some fuel in the engine that drives economic growth, which is the business sector. This administration has done nothing but put stuff in the caboose, and it's not moving this economy. We must grow this economy, number one. Number two, we must assure that our currency is sound. Just like a dollar must be a dollar when we wake up in the morning. Just like 60 minutes is in an hour, a dollar must be a dollar. If we are growing this economy the way it has the ability to do, and at the same time we are cutting spending seriously, we will have things moving in the right direction in order to be able to survive these kind of ripple effects.
So to be clear, focus on the domestic economy, allow Italy to fail.
Focus on the domestic economy or we will fail. So yes, focus on the domestic economy first. There's not a lot that the United States can directly do for Italy right now because they're really way beyond the point of return that we as the United States can save them.
Governor Romney, should we allow Italy to fail? Should we have a stake in what's going on in the Eurozone right now?
Well, Europe is able to take care of their own problems. We don't want to step in and try and bail out their banks and bail out their governments. They have the capacity to deal with that themselves. They're a very large economy, and there will be, I'm sure, cries if Italy does default, if Italy does get in trouble, and we don't know that'll happen, but if they get to a point where they're in crisis, and banks throughout Europe that hold a lot of Italy debt will then face crisis, and there'll have to be some kind of effort to try and uphold their financial system. There will be some who say here that banks in the U.S. that have Italian debt, that we ought to help those as well. My view is no. We do not need to step in to bail out banks either in Europe or banks here in the U.S. that may have Italian debt. The right answer is for us.
But the U.S. does contribute to the International Monetary Fund, and the IMF has given $150 billion to the Eurozone. Are you saying the U.S. should stop contributing to the IMF?
I'm happy to continue to participate in world efforts like the World Bank and the IMF, but I'm not happy to have the United States government put in place a TARP-like program to try and save U.S. banks that have Italian debt, foreign banks doing business in the U.S. that have Italian debt, or European debt. We're just banks there. There's going to be an effort to try and draw us in and talk about how we need to help Italy and help Europe. Europe is able to help Europe. We have to focus on getting our own economy in order and making sure we never reach the kind of problem Italy is having. If we stay on the course we're on, with the level of borrowing this administration is carrying out, if we don't get serious about cutting and capping our spending and balancing our budget, you're going to find America in the same position Italy is in 4 or 5 years from now, and that is unacceptable. We got to fix our deficit here.
Congressman Paul. These gentlemen have to say, and I really get that, but I'm on the front lines of the stock market. We were down 400 points today. We're not going to be done going down if this keeps going up. If Italy the rates keep going up, surely you must recognize that this is a moment-to-moment situation for people who have 401ks and IRAs on the line, and you wouldn't just let it fail, just go away and take our banking system with it.
No, you have to let it liquidate. We took 40 years to build up this worldwide debt. We're in a debt crisis never seen before in our history. The sovereign debt of this world is equal to the GDP as ours is in this country. If you prop it up, you'll do exactly what we did in the Depression, prolong the agony. If you prop it up, you do what Japan has done for 20 years. So yes, you want to liquidate the debt. The debt is unsustainable, and this bubble was predictable because 40 years ago we had no restraints whatsoever on the monetary authorities, and we piled debt on debt, we pyramided debt, we had no restraints on the spending, and if you keep bailing people out and prop it up, you just prolong the agony as we're doing in the housing bubble. Right now, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are demanding more money because we don't allow the market to determine what these mortgages are worth. If you don't liquidate this and clear the market, believe me, you're going to perpetuate this for a decade or two more, and that is very, very dangerous.
Governor Henson, 30 seconds to follow. Italy's too big to fail. It's great. I'd love it if we're independent. It would be terrific if you say it's your fault. Just your fault. It's your problem. But if this goes the world banking system could shut down. Doesn't that involve our banks too?
So we wake up this morning and we find that the yield curve with respect to Italy is up and prices are down. So if you want a window into what this country is going to look like in the future if we don't get on top of our debt, you're seeing it playing out in Europe right now. You're seeing the metastasis effect of the banking sector. And what does it mean here? What am I most concerned about, Jim? I'm concerned that it impacts us in a way that moves into our banking sector where we've got a huge problem called too big to fail in this country. We have 6 banks in this country that combined have assets worth 66% of our nation's GDP, $9.4 trillion. These institutions get hit. They have an implied bailout by the taxpayers in this country. And that means we're setting ourselves up for disaster again. Jim, as long as we have banks that are too big to fail in this country, we're going to catch the contagion, and it's going to hurt us. We've got to get back to a day and age where we have properly sized banks and financial institutions.
Thank you, Governor. Governor Romney, I want to switch to the bailout drama that we've lived through in this country, and no state understands it better than the state of Michigan. I'm going to talk a little bit about your record on that. 4 years ago, when you were running for the Republican nomination and the auto industry was suffering, you said, "Where's Washington?" After the election, when the Bush administration was considering financial assistance for the automakers, you said, "No, let Detroit go bankrupt." Now that the companies are profitable again, after a bailout supported by your Republican governor here in Michigan, you said, "Well, actually, President Obama implemented my plan all along," or he gravitated to my plan. With a record like that of seeming to be on all sides of the issue, why should Republicans be confident in the steadiness of your economic leadership?
John, I care about this state and about the auto industry like, I'd guess, like no one else on this stage, having been born and raised here, watched my parents make their life here. I was here in the 1950s and 1960s when Detroit and Michigan was the pride of the nation. I've seen this industry and I've seen this state go through tough times. And my view some years ago was that the federal government, by putting in place CAFE requirements that helped foreign automobiles gain market share in the U.S., was hurting Detroit. And so I said, where is Washington? They're not doing the job they ought to be doing. My view with regards to the bailout was that whether it was by President Bush or by President Obama, it was the wrong way to go. I said from the very beginning they should go through a managed bankruptcy process, a private bankruptcy process. We have capital markets and bankruptcy. It works in the U.S. The idea of billions of dollars being wasted initially, then finally they adopted the managed bankruptcy. I was among others that said we ought to do that. And then after that, they gave the company to the UAW, they gave General Motors to the UAW, and they gave Chrysler to Fiat. My plan, we would have had a private sector bailout with the private sector restructuring and bankruptcy with the private sector guiding the direction, as opposed to what we had with government playing its heavy hand.
Governor, let me follow up, because the auto bailout is part of a larger issue facing your candidacy, as you know. Your opponents have said you've switched positions on many issues. It's an issue of character, not personal, but political. You seem to encapsulate it in the last debate when you said, "I'm running for office for Pete's sake." What can you say to Republicans to persuade them that the things you say in the campaign are rooted in something deeper than the fact that you're running for office?
John, I think people know me pretty well, particularly in this state, in the state of Massachusetts, New Hampshire that's close by, Utah where I served in the Olympics. I think people understand that I'm a man of steadiness and constancy. I don't think you're going to find somebody who has more of those attributes than I do. I've been married to the same woman for 25, excuse me, I'll get in trouble, for 42 years. I've been in the same church my entire life. I worked at one company, Bain, for 25 years, and I left that to go off and help save the Olympic Games. I think it's outrageous that the Obama campaign continues to push this idea when you have in the Obama administration the most political presidency we've seen in modern history. They're actually deciding when to pull out of Afghanistan based on politics. Let me tell you this. If I'm president of the United States, I will be true to my family, to my faith, and to our country, and I will never apologize for the United States of America. That's my belief.
Governor Perry, I want to ask you about this because you've raised this issue yourself about Governor Romney, and you're running as a politician with strong convictions. From the flip side, Ronald Reagan raised taxes when the deficit got too big.
Well, I think if you look at the problem with the economic meltdown, you can trace it right back to the federal government, because it was the federal government that demanded that banks and mortgage companies lower platinum-level lending standards to new lows.
But the federal government had also deregulated them.
It was the federal government that pushed the subprime loans. It was the federal government that pushed the Community Reinvestment Act. It was Congressman Barney Frank and also Senator Chris Dodd that continued to push government-directed housing goals. They pushed the banks to meet these rules. And if banks failed to meet those rules, then the federal government said, we won't let you merge. We won't let you grow.
No, let me draw a distinction. I think virtually every American has a reason to be angry. I think virtually every American has a reason to be worried. I think the people who are protesting on Wall Street break into two groups. One is left-wing agitators who would be happy to show up next week on any other topic. And the other is sincere middle-class people who, frankly, are very close to the Tea Party people in actually caring. You can tell which group is which. The people who are decent, responsible citizens pick up after themselves. The people who are just out there as activists trash the place and walk off and are proud of having trashed it. So let's draw that distinction. The fix was put in by the federal government. And if you want to put people in jail, I want to second what Michelle said. You ought to start with Barney Frank and Chris Dodd, and let's look at the politicians who created the environment, the politicians who profited from the environment, and the politicians who put this country in trouble.
Clearly you're not saying they should go to jail.
Well, in Chris Dodd's case, go back and look at the countryside deals. In Barney Frank's case, go back and look at the lobbyists he was close to at Freddie Mac. All I'm saying is, so if you were everybody in the media who wants to go after the business community ought to start by going after the politicians who have been at the heart of the sickness which is weakening this country, and ought to start with Bernanke, who has still not been exposed for the hundreds of billions of dollars.
And as far as you're concerned, there's no institution, no financial institution that's too big to fail.
Well, no, you don't want to bail out anybody. The idea of trying to bail out an institution to protect the shareholders or to protect certain interest group, that's a terrible idea. And that shouldn't happen. You do want to make sure that we don't lose the country, and we don't lose our financial system, and we don't lose American jobs, and that all the banks don't go under. So you have to take action very carefully to make sure that you preserve our currency and preserve our financial system. But bailouts of individual institutions, no one has interest in that, I don't think.
When you take the 999 plan and you turn it upside down, I think the devil's in the details.
All right. Mr. Kaine, in the past you've been rather critical of any of us who would want to audit the Fed. You said you've used pretty strong terms that we were ignorant and that we didn't know what we were doing, and therefore there was no need for a Fed audit anyway, because if you had one, you're not going to find out everything because everybody knows everything about the Fed. But now that we have found and we've gotten an audit, we have found out an awful lot on how special businesses get, bailed out. Wall Street, the banks, and special companies, foreign governments. And you said that you advise those of us who are concerned, and you belittled, you say, call up the Federal Reserve and just ask them to get the PR person. So do you still stick by this, that this is frivolous, or do you think it's very important? 64% of the American people want a full audit of the Fed on a regular basis.
Mr. Kaine.
First of all, you have misquoted me. I did not call you or any of your people ignorant. I don't know where that came from.
I'll get it for you.
All right? Now, so you got to be careful of the stuff that you get off the internet, because that's just not something that I have said. Secondly, when I served on the board of the Federal Reserve in the 1990s, we didn't do any of the things that this Federal Reserve is doing. I don't agree with the actions of this Federal Reserve. I don't agree with the actions that have been undertaken by Ben Bernanke. We didn't have a $14 trillion national debt to prop up with some of the actions that they're taking. And I have also said, to be precise, I do not object to the Federal Reserve being audited. I simply said, if someone wants to initiate that action, go right ahead. It doesn't bother me. So I've been misrepresented in that regard. I don't have a problem with the Federal Reserve being audited. It's simply not my top priority. My top priority is 999. Jobs, jobs, jobs.
My question is, since I think Herman Cain is giving naively a tool in his 999 plan of giving Washington a huge new tax opportunity to get money through a sales tax, can we trust you that with your lack of experience that you won't continually give Washington the ability to take freedom away from freedom-loving people here in the live free or die state?
There are three deterrents to this nightmare scenario you described in terms of how bad things are going to be because we're trying to fix the real problem. The first deterrent is that I'm going to ask the United States Congress to include a 2/3 majority vote before they can raise the 999 tax. The second deterrent is the fact that because it is visible, simple, and transparent, the American people are going to be the ones to hold Congress's feet to the fire. The third deterrent is that I will be president and I won't sign anything that raises the 999.
Yeah.
With that, we take a break and come back for our final segment. Stay with us.
The way Alan Greenspan oversaw the Fed and the way he coordinated with all of the Federal Reserve banks, I think that it worked fine back in the early 1990s. Now, on that same point, I have already identified two candidates, which I cannot give their names, to replace Mr. Bernanke in anticipation of having that responsibility.
Okay, Congressman Paul.
Spoken like a true insider. No, Alan Greenspan was a disaster.
Congresswoman Bachmann.
I'd like to add to that because the Dodd-Frank bill is the Jobs and Housing Destruction Act. And by the way, that's why we see the new $5 debit card fee that people are paying every month that they're upset about because of Dodd-Frank. And that was insider dealing because Senator Durbin had former staffers that came to lobby him on behalf of retailers. This is dirty dealing. As President of the United States, I would end all of these payoffs to political donors by our legislators. That's wrong. That's got to end.
Quoting you. Don't blame Wall Street. Don't blame the big banks. If you don't have a job and you're not rich, blame yourself. So are you telling the 14 million unemployed Americans that it's their fault that they don't have a job?
No, the question was, that response was directed at the people that are protesting on Wall Street, not that 14 million people who are out of work for no reason of their own other than that the economy is not growing, not the millions of people that are underemployed. That statement was not directed at them. It was specifically directed at the people who are protesting on Wall Street, and I also said that they have basically targeted the